Welcome to where time falls quiet.
Anders megaliths, stones, so perfect, we can't explain. Take a moment to subscribe, so this place of calm is always here for you. The first thing you must understand is that the earth remembers. Beneath every layer of dust and clay, beneath every ruin and rusted tool, there lies a catalogue of what once was. It does not speak in words, yet its silence is articulate. The strata do not lie, they record. Imagine your fingertips pressing into that ancient soil, granules sifting like the seconds of forgotten centuries. You are not merely touching dirt, you are touching memory itself. The world beneath your feet murmurs, softly, insistently, a voice that predates language. We like to tell ourselves that history moves forward, that progress is linear, neat, and cumulative. But the sediment tells a different tale. Cyclical, fragmented, recursive. Civilizations bloom like brief oases before the desert closes again. Beneath the dunes of Egypt, under the basalt of Peru, beneath the silted plains of Mesopotamia, are whispers of structures and inscriptions that do not fit the timeline. The official story says we began from stone and rose to silicon, but what if the arc bends backward? What if we are walking through the ruins of someone else's modernity? Silence here is deceptive. It pretends to be absence, yet it conceals a density too vast for even language to contain. Geological surveys find layers of fused glass buried beneath sterile sands, evidence of heat beyond any known ancient furnace. Archaeologists call them fulgurites or meteoric impacts, yet their geometry suggests deliberate alignment. Ancient texts describe fires from heaven, the fall of gods, oceans that boiled. The myth-makers may have been accountants of calamity rather than poets of imagination. The silence of myth is the silence of trauma. Imagine kneeling beside a shallow excavation trench in southern Iraq. The air is still, heavy with dust. What the trowel uncovers is not bone or brick, but a tablet, a fragment of administrative record from the 3rd millennium before Christ. The cuneiform lines are sharp, mathematical, calculated. They list quantities of barley and labour, but then, unexpectedly, celestial coordinates. Declinations, sidereal cycles, the precession of a sky already understood. How could a culture that had barely tamed irrigation also quantify the precession of the equinoxes? The answer hangs there like a question too ancient to phrase. The past does not appear gradually. It erupts. The first known cities, Uruk, Eridu, Kish, did not evolve from farming hamlets. They emerged fully annotated, temples, law codes, and written script. No preamble, no prototypes, as though the blueprint itself had survived while its builders perished. This discontinuity is the first fracture in the accepted record. It is as if someone pressed restart on civilization, reloading a program they themselves did not write. The river valleys were laboratories of restoration, not invention. The clay tablet hardens in the sun. Its marks become fossilized thoughts, while its authors dissolve into anonymity. Hold one in your mind for a moment. Each sign incised by a reed stylus is not guesswork, but memory, encoded meticulously by those who considered themselves heirs, not pioneers. The system they used, sexagesimal, based on 60, is the same that underpins our modern geometry and timekeeping. Coincidence or continuity? If you listen closely, you can almost hear the rhythm of those 60 beats in the turning of the heavens. Now picture the sands of Egypt. Beneath the visible grandeur of Giza lies a substratum of erased effort. Stone causeways, subterranean chambers, tunnels of precision that predate known dynasties. When seismic surveys trace the bedrock, they find cavities aligned not with the Nile but with celestial declinations. The stones breathe in ratios, not superstition. It is not hubris to wonder if what we call the beginning of architecture was itself an act of remembrance. The builders worked not to invent eternity, but to imitate it. The geologists speak of time in layers, the archaeologists in typologies, the linguists in roots. Yet their disciplines intersect at the same haunting muteness. Below the chronological markers before pottery and metallurgy lie disturbances in sediment that suggest human agency, yet technology inconsistent with their supposed era. The stone is cut as if softened. The surfaces bear traces of methods we cannot replicate with iron, much less copper. Each core sample is a quiet contradiction. The silence deepens. Imagine the camera descending slowly through a vertical shaft cut into bedrock. The temperature cools, the sound recedes. What greets you is not void, but calculation. The passages curve with astronomical logic, descending precisely at angles connected to solstitial arcs. Someone, long before Egypt was Egypt, measured the heavens with instruments we do not believe existed. Think about that precision in the dark. The sand above is not oblivion, it is a veil. And yet the orthodox narrative persists. Civilization rose once. Its spread was uneven but unbroken. The textbooks assure us there was no reset, no forgotten parent civilization lost beneath cataclysm or tide. Still, each discovery strains that narrative further. The erosion patterns on the Sphinx, the symmetry of megaliths scattered across continents, the inexplicable genetic admixture between separated peoples, all threads of a tapestry too deliberate to dismiss. The institution cannot admit it, but the stones whisper otherwise. You must understand that the past has two voices. The first is declarative, the one found in inscriptions, in royal decrees, in the confident geometry of ziggurats and pyramids. The second is residual, the voice buried within erosion, isotopic residue, misfit artifacts. It does not shout, it lingers. It asks you to see patterns across millennia, to connect what keeps in separate boxes. This second voice is older than kings and quieter than any scripture. It is the whisper beneath the sand. In laboratories far from deserts, technicians analyze mineral inclusions, carbon samples, magnetic alignments. Their instruments hum softly, almost reverently. The data that comes back is bureaucratic in tone, numbers, rates, isotope values. Yet behind that sterile format emerge anomalies. Stone cut when no tool should have existed, pigments from strata millennia apart, alignments correcting for precessional shifts only detectable with long-term astronomical observation. The report does not emote, it simply lists. But within that list hums a quiet astonishment. The evidence does not align, it coheres into suspicion. Imagine for a moment that these were not the first builders, but the last archivists of something preceding them. What kind of catastrophe does it take to erase a civilization so thoroughly that only mathematical habits survive? A deluge, a fall of ice, a solar event erasing memory in light? The myths are unanimous about the flood, about fire, about the reset that came from the sky. We treat them as metaphors. But stratigraphy does not speak metaphorically. The blackened layers of organic ash, the sudden collapses in sea levels, the extinction pulses in pollen samples. These are entries in the diary of Earth herself. The paradox is unbearable. The more we uncover, the less we understand. Each recovered tablet, each unearthed object, widens the gap between what is explained and what is experienced. The closer we get to origins, the more advanced they appear. Scholars call it the Neolithic enigma, how agriculture, writing, mathematics, and cosmology appear simultaneously within a few centuries, as if downloaded. If knowledge was inherited rather than invented, then the true beginning of civilization occurred not when we first built cities, but when we first tried to remember. Close your eyes and imagine standing in a desert at night. The air is still, the constellations motionless, yet across thousands of years those same stars shifted, precessing slowly around invisible poles. Someone tracked that. Someone inscribed that movement into myth, temple, and measurement. The question that matters is not who they were, but from whom they learned. Because memory itself has structure, mathematical, recursive, precise. And somewhere in that silence lies the trace of those who first understood the clockwork sky. When archaeologists dust a fragment of pottery, they expect continuity. But what they find instead are discontinuities that defy cultural ancestry. Motifs replicated on opposite ends of oceans, identical stone weights within separate systems, astronomical ratios encoded in myths of people who never met. The temptation is to imagine diffusion, lost explorers, accidental contact. Yet there is a deeper, more ambiguous explanation: inheritance through ruin. Civilizations rise, inherit incomplete frameworks, reinterpret the fragments, and call it invention. In truth, they are remembering imperfectly. Every culture has its own genesis, but most begin not with creation, but with restoration after catastrophe. The gods do not invent, they rebuild. The Sumerian texts speak of kingship descending from heaven after the flood, as though it were reinstated, not initiated. The Egyptian priests of Heliopolis claimed their records stretched back to a time before the sun rose, where it rises now. We call these exaggerations, but they might be attempts to preserve something too vast to contextualize. The flicker of a previous epoch seen through mythic glass. Hold that thought and listen. The desert is never truly silent. The wind moves particles across stone, reshaping them infinitesimally. Each dune is a slow-motion avalanche of memory. To walk through it is to wade through forgotten blueprints, temples that once stood where the sand now drifts, corridors misaligned by time, whispers repeating the same eternal coordinates. It is both archive and tomb. The sand conceals, yet it preserves. Every step connects you to hands you will never see. In its rigor, demands skepticism. But even skepticism must answer to evidence. When multiple disciplines, each blind to the others, begin circling the same conclusion, a pattern emerges. Paleoclimatology aligns with mythology. Archaeoastronomy aligns with geometry. Linguistics aligns with migration patterns. None claim truth alone, but together they hint at coherence. As if fragments across time long to reunite, the whisper is growing louder. We stand on a world that may not be first, only latest. Our towers and data centers rest on forgotten cities, our circuitry powered by metals similar to those forged in antiquity's furnaces. If knowledge is cyclic, then so is loss. The question is not how advanced we are, but how temporary. The tablets of Sumer endure because they are clay. What of our digital clay, our coded archives, when the next silence descends? The signal will fade, and one day someone will dig again, finding fibers of glass and silicon, wondering who we were and who we remembered. So, pause here. Let the sand shift between your thoughts. The whisper is not calling for belief. It is asking for listening. Every ruin, every tablet, every improbable alignment is a syllable in the long language of loss. The earth does not keep secrets, it keeps records. Civilization did not begin, it resurfaced. And beneath us all, the archive hums, waiting for someone to remember how to read it again. The sun rises over the plateau of Giza with a precision that should be impossible for mere coincidence. Each morning, the light moves across the limestone faces, as if in deliberate dialogue with the geometry itself. From a distance, the pyramids appear static, timeless monoliths. But if you stand close enough, if you let the heat of the stone and the silence of the desert enter your lungs, you begin to feel movement. Not physical motion, but the oscillation of intention. Every angle, every block, every shadow speaks of measure, of proportion, of astronomical fidelity. The monument is not a tomb. It is a statement carved into the geometry of time. The Great Pyramid stands at a latitude that mirrors the curvature of our planet, aligned almost perfectly to true north, deviating only by a fraction of a single arc minute. That degree of precision is challenging even with modern equipment calibrated through satellite data. Yet the builders managed it with copper tools and stone hammers, or so we are told. How do we reconcile that contradiction? To align an edifice the height of a 40-story building with such accuracy requires not simple labor, but a sophisticated mathematical schema. Its foundation implies a comprehension of the Earth as a sphere and the stars as coordinates within a vast celestial grid. The geometry is not primitive, it is planetary. Imagine tracing your fingers along the limestone casing stones, polished once to brilliance so pure that sunlight would have made the structure shine like a mirror to heaven. The ratio of the pyramid's height to its base equals 2 times pi when scaled to unit measurements. Not approximately, but explicitly. The same constant that defines circular perfection is encoded within a 4-sided prism of stone. How does that happen by accident? The structure seems to act as a translator between shapes, between the circle of heaven and the square of earth. The builders spoke a language of mathematics, but their grammar was carved into mass and gravity. Each chamber within the pyramid has a resonance. Acoustic engineers who tested the king's chamber found frequencies that stabilize around 110 Hz, a tone matching the natural resonance of the human chest cavity. When sound is projected inside, the waves multiply and sustain far beyond what the volume should allow. Was it coincidence, or did the architects tune this resonance deliberately? The geometry of the space acts as an amplifier, a bridge between physical and vibrational architecture. A place designed not merely to store the dead, but to awaken the living. At the base of the plateau, archaeologists discovered remnants of an ancient causeway whose slope and curvature correspond to the angle of Earth's axial tilt. The very ground plan seems rooted in astronomical mechanics, yet official doctrine insists that the pyramid builders possessed only rudimentary surveying tools, plumb bobs, cubits, rope. Tools that could not achieve such scale without a pre-existing theory of measure. The pattern repeats too perfectly for error. Angles of inclination matching the slope of Earth at latitude 30, alignments with Orion's belt, shafts directed at precise stellar coordinates frozen millennia ago. Coincidence collapses under that weight. Stand at the eastern face at dawn. The light does not merely illuminate, it reenacts. The shadow line traces equinox symmetry, signaling the shifting balance between seasons. It is as though the pyramid breathes with the sky. In that moment, the stone ceases to be a static object. It becomes an instrument measuring cosmic time. The masonry, in its mathematical intimacy, mirrors the planet's slow oscillation, what astronomers call precession, the wobble of Earth's axis over cycles of thousands of years. Were the ancient builders aware of such cycles? If so, who taught them, and from what deeper archive did their numbers flow? The Sphinx watches silently, its gaze anchored along the horizon line where the sun rises on the spring equinox. Geological analysis of its body reveals weathering patterns formed not by desert winds, but by rainfall, erosion caused by centuries of persistent precipitation. Yet in the era attributed to its carving, the Sahara had long been arid. This contradiction is not minor. It disrupts an entire timeline. The erosion indicates an origin thousands of years older, from a climate that predates dynastic Egypt. The implication is profound. Either the environment changed catastrophically, or the monument belongs to an earlier civilization whose memory was absorbed by its inheritors. Inside the pyramid, the walls bear no ornate inscriptions, no decorations of afterlife or heroic glory. The silence is deliberate. Where later tombs are crowded with color and text, this structure is clinical, mathematical, bureaucratic in purity. It is not a narrative, but an equation. The polished granite surfaces reflect light, as if designed to direct energy rather than symbolism. Every passage narrows with geometric intention, compressing the body and expanding the mind. To walk inside is to traverse a formula written in stone, a transition from human measure to cosmic proportion. Some researchers have noted that the pyramid's perimeter equals a fraction of Earth's circumference, scaled by a constant known only through spherical geometry. This correlation cannot be explained by trial and error. It implies globe mapping, knowledge of planetary measure only rediscovered in the age of navigation, millennia later. If that is an accident, then itself participated in architecture. But the precision suggests otherwise. It suggests inheritance. The pyramid builders may not have invented geometry. They may have been translating, preserving a code left by predecessors whose did not survive in text, but in stone. Consider also the alignment of the three great pyramids. Their pattern reflects not arbitrary imperial ambition, but the configuration of Orion's belt at a specific epoch, approximately 10,500 years before our current era. The same period when the Sphinx's erosion suggests wetter climates and the melting of ice caps. This triangulation of data, geological, astronomical, stratigraphic, forms a narrative independent of speculation. It means the builders either retained records from that lost epoch or built to honor it. The sky in that age mirrored the ground, as above, so below. The question becomes not who built them, but who remembered them. For the ancient Egyptians, Ma'at, the principle of cosmic order, guided every act of construction. To align with Ma'at was to align with the pattern that sustains the universe. The pyramid, therefore, is not a building, but a calibration tool. Its precision is devotional, an act of synchronization with celestial rhythm. In the absence of modern instruments, they turned the landscape itself into a device, calibrating through pattern rather than machinery. We, in our arrogance, call it superstition, but perhaps it was disguised as ritual. the mathematics of reverence. If one examines the geological base under Khufu's pyramid, microfractures reveal stress patterns distributed purposefully, as if engineers anticipated seismic movement. They used layers of limestone and granite in alternating density to absorb vibration, much like modern architectural damping systems. This is not guesswork, but applied physics. How did a society supposedly limited to copper chisels understand material resonance, load distribution, and harmonic tension? The evidence suggests empirical observation across centuries, or the remnants of a knowledge system far older than recorded Egypt. Imagine the construction process as recitation, each block weighing multiple tons placed with algorithmic precision. The workforce moved like living computation, guided by an unseen geometry. If one misalignment occurred, the entire ratio would distort, yet it did not. Each angle meets its neighbor in fractional perfection. The myth says slaves labored endlessly under whips, but the engineering says otherwise. To maintain geometric tolerance across such scale requires not fear, but coordination through understanding. This was the mathematics of purpose, not tyranny. What purpose, then, could possibly justify this effort? The tomb theory unravels under scrutiny. No mummified remains have ever been found within the Great Pyramid. No markings identify its occupant. The internal architecture lacks ceremonial corridors or iconography characteristic of royal burial. Instead, the structure behaves like an energy system, a spatial equation balancing mass and measurement, earth and sky. Perhaps it was an observatory, a signal or a stabilizer of planetary consciousness, if such a thing can be scientifically imagined. Or perhaps it was a memory device, preserving ratios that encode cosmological constants in case knowledge one day failed. The silence within the chamber is not the silence of emptiness. It hums. Standing there, every sound rebounds infinitely until you feel the space vibrating with your own heartbeat. This experience is deliberate, theatrical, yet functional. The architecture participates in physiology. The pyramid amplifies the observer, forcing awareness of breath, pulse, resonance. It converts the human body into instrument. The message seems clear. Whatever civilization built this structure understood sound, pressure, and emotion as connected dimensions of reality. They engineered awe. We measure time through dynasties, but the pyramid measures time through light. Seasonal shifts alter the angles of illumination, transforming the monument's surface into a celestial clock. The shadow at noon decreases and increases across the solstices in measurable rhythm. Its precision is beyond error, a geometry that predicts motion across millennia. If the builders knew precession, they understood cycles, not human lifetimes, but epochs. Each block, therefore, participates in chronology, turning architecture into calendar. The pyramid is frozen motion. Over the centuries, scholars attempted to disassemble the mystery by attributing the numbers to coincidence or aesthetic instinct. Yet the data remains stubborn. The structure's measurements in cubits, when converted, yield constants used today in trigonometry, such as pi and the golden ratio. If coincidence repeats perfectly at scale, it ceases to be coincidence. It becomes design by inherited rule. The pyramid builders might have worked from templates, architectural records of a lost lineage preserved not on parchment, but in proportion itself. Knowledge fossilized as form. And so we confront a paradox older than the stone itself. Either a Bronze Age society independently achieved mathematical and geological mastery, rivaling that of the modern world, or it inherited fragments of a vanished civilization that once mapped the planet and the heavens with equal intimacy. Both possibilities are staggering. To accept the first is to redefine human potential. To accept the second is to accept that history, like geology, is stratified with erasures. The pyramid stands as the boundary stone between memory and amnesia. Stand again beneath the desert sun. Let your gaze follow the horizon where the pyramids meet the sky, and imagine that buried somewhere beneath your feet lie earlier foundations, eroded yet enduring, perhaps the prototypes of the prototypes. If every civilization is built upon the ruins of another, then Giza is less a monument than a resurrection. The geometry it encodes is the genome of civilization itself. Ratios passed down, misunderstood, reapplied, until their origin vanished. In that sense, the Great Pyramid is not ancient at all. It is perennial, endlessly reinterpreted, always rediscovered by minds reaching for the same cosmic alignment. The official story asks for belief in progression, in the steady illumination of discovery leading from ignorance to knowledge. Yet here, in the shadow of Giza, the reverse seems true. We have forgotten more than we have learned. The sand around the pyramid is not merely sediment, it is accumulated loss. What the ancients built may not have been the first civilization's triumph, but the last civilization's echo. Their silence is deliberate, their measures exact, their warnings encoded in geometry. The forgotten language of stone still speaks. It simply waits for us to listen. The plain of southern Mesopotamia does not speak in monuments of stone, but in the muted language of clay. Beneath the mounds known today as tells, countless tablets sleep, encased in strata of dust, layered by the breath of 4,000 years. The first civilization to write did so with reeds pressed into mud, but the marks they left behind were anything but primitive. Their lines and wedges form the oldest record of thought, patient, measured, administrative. Yet behind the lists of grain and workers hides something staggering: precision. There, in the cradle of civilization, mathematics was not being born, it was being remembered. When archaeologists unearthed the city of Uruk, they did not find a slow evolution of script or counting. Instead, they discovered an entire bureaucracy of symbols already refined, columns of numerals, tables, and geometric relationships. The city appears fully conscious of abstraction, as though an invisible hand had installed knowledge rather than invented it. The scribes wrote in a base 60 system, an arithmetic far more complex than the decimal one. To this day, our divisions of time and angles, 60 seconds, 60 minutes, 360 degrees, still echo their calculations. The resonance of Sumerian thought hums within the most ordinary acts of measurement. Imagine that you are standing in a dim, archive room, lit only by the reflection of oil lamps off the damp clay. Thousands of tablets surround you, stacked like ancient servers in a data vault. Most are ledgers, boring, meticulous inventories, but among them lie anomalies, broken fragments containing ratios so precise they anticipate trigonometric principles by millennia. One tablet, worn yet legible, lists values corresponding to right-angled triangles, a sequence that perfectly satisfies the Pythagorean relation. To find such comprehension 1,000 years before the birth of the Greek philosophers is to feel the ground of history tilt beneath your feet. The scholars at first dismissed this complexity as coincidence. They argued that the Sumerians possessed an intuitive sense of geometry, nothing more. But repeated discoveries refused to conform to that comfort. The symbols reveal not estimation, but algorithms, the systematic handling of equations applied to trade, architecture, and astronomy. In one sequence of signs, the distances of planets are treated as cycles, correlating to fixed numerical patterns in the heavens. These inscriptions are not the hesitant steps of a newborn, they are the footnotes of a curriculum already known. The questions ceased to be what the Sumerians discovered and became who had taught them. The mythic texts of the region speak in hushed reverence of the Apkallu, beings of wisdom who arrived before the flood, bringing order, writing, and geometry. The historians hear myth, the archaeologists hear metaphor. But buried in the groundwater layers surrounding early Sumerian cities lies evidence of a massive cataclysm. Flood deposits, thick bands of sterile clay, spanning entire excavation profiles. The deluge was no fable, it was a stratigraphic reality. When the waters receded, civilization did not emerge anew, it resumed. The scribes described knowledge descending from the heavens, but perhaps it was simply memory resurfacing from the mud. Among the most perplexing artifacts are the early star maps. The Sumerians catalogued celestial bodies invisible to the naked eye, planets whose existence would only be verified with telescopes in the modern age. Whether these positions were extrapolated through mathematics or inherited from older records, no one can say with certainty. Yet the precision remains undeniable. Their priests knew the length of the lunar month to within a fraction of a second, and they predicted eclipses generations in advance. The sophistication of their astronomy implies an observation period far longer than their recorded history allows. It suggests inheritance over improvisation. Imagine for a moment the temple at Eridu, the mythical first city. Its layout is rectangular, oriented to true cardinal points with an error margin smaller than modern surveyors achieve without instruments. Beneath the latest construction phase, archaeologists excavated earlier temples, each smaller but identical in plan, descending deep into the earth like a recursive memory. At the lowest level, melted clay floors show signs of intense heat, as though struck by catastrophe. That foundation predates known Sumer itself. Whatever was there first, the Sumerians built upon it, replicating the geometry faithfully, as if copying from a memory too sacred to alter. Their creation myths speak of epochs ruled by kings, with lifespans of tens of thousands of years. Scholars dismiss these as exaggerations, symbolic registers of divine authority. But when translated into units of their sexagesimal system, these numbers often reduce to astronomical cycles, multiples of 3600, a figure known as a sar representing a celestial period. These are not lifetimes. They are epochs, coded as reigns to preserve chronology. The scribes were not chronicling kings. They were measuring time through metaphor. What appears as mythology may, in reality, be a record of cosmic rhythm expressed through the human lens. When British excavators unearthed the royal tombs of Ur, they expected crude beginnings of monarchy. Instead, they found mechanical precision, gold filigree rivaling Renaissance artisanship, metallurgical alloys impossible without controlled temperature furnaces, and inlay work requiring microscales of measurement. These were not experiments, they were restorations. A lost standard of technique reappeared briefly, then vanished again. Every recovered artifact whispers the same secret. The Sumerians were working from a template they did not invent. The language of Sumer remains an isolate, a tongue unrelated to any other known linguistic family. Its grammar is agglutinative, stacking modifiers like geological layers, and its vocabulary is heavy with technical abstraction. For such an early language to encode complex administrative and astronomical terminology defies the usual linguistic evolution. Words for measurement, for angular momentum, for celestial recurrence. These do not arise in illiterate societies. They are the terminology of professionals. Even the word for writing, cuneiform, translates literally as wedge-shaped impressions, an action of recording already conceptualized, not discovered. To speak Sumerian is to inherit intent from minds already literate. Walk again through the ruins of Uruk, where the ziggurat rises over the plain like a man-made mountain. Its geometry mirrors the stepped formations of older, eroded sites found far beyond Mesopotamia. The alignment of its corners traces solstitial points, creating an architectural calendar embedded in brick. The structure invites assent, not for spectacle but for measurement. Each terrace corresponds to angular increments between horizon and zenith during solar transition. The temple was an instrument, a calculator built for light. When priests climbed its summit, they stepped through equations embodied in the sky. The archives continually reveal anomalies labeled as administrative artifacts, yet reading like scientific data. One text divides the circle into 360 parts, just as we do today. Another lists coefficients for scaling surfaces and volumes, anticipating the principles of calculus. And then there are the lexical lists, multilingual dictionaries cataloguing terms in Sumerian and Akkadian side by side, centuries before comparative linguistics. This was not the stumbling dawn of logic. It was the methodical re-inscription of a legacy. Each tablet is both manual and memory, a footnote to an encyclopedia lost to time. The Sumerians credited their knowledge to the gods, who, according to legend, walked among men in the early days and taught writing directly. Such statements are easily dismissed as myth-making. But perhaps the gods were simply the survivors of an earlier world, bearers of remnant knowledge misunderstood by the generations that followed. When a society reduced to survival encounters, the engineers of a vanished past, the line between divinity and technology blurs. In that confusion, reverence replaces comprehension. The myth of divine instruction may mask the trauma of inherited. Even their arithmetic bears emotional weight. The use of 60 as base, repeating endlessly through fractions, reveals a comfort with infinity. Their mathematics was not counting. It was cosmology. Each calculation paralleled the cyclical behavior of the stars, the seasons, and even the human breath. Numbers were living entities, recurring, rhythmic, eternal. This is not mere anthropological symbolism, it is the architecture of thought itself, shaped by an awareness that reality operates through repetition. The Sumerian system was built not to imitate, but to resonate with it. At night, when the Euphrates shimmered under the reflection of starlight, those ancient astronomers recorded the sky on clay, like our modern scientists record data on silicon. They translated the movement of constellations into temporal prediction, turning night into formula. Each rising star was an hour, each conjunction a warning or an omen articulated mathematically. The priests of Nippur and Ur traced cycles lasting not years but entire ages. To calculate such lengths requires observation across multiple generations, unless those calculations were not new, but drawn from a preserved canon older than the flood. So imagine the breathless moment when the first archaeologist read one of those tablets and realized the implications. The elegant columns of numbers, the geometric symmetry, the system of doubling and halving, all the elements of modern computation already living in clay. History convulsed in that moment, yet the revelation barely entered the public narrative. It was too inconvenient, too destabilizing. If civilization arises from amnesia, then rediscovered knowledge threatens identity. The idea that history could cycle, that progress could decay into myth, unsettles far more than chronology. It challenges the illusion of permanence itself. We like to imagine ourselves as the first to master the cosmos, but the Sumerians, with their instruments of clay, already charted the sky with uncannily modern accuracy. Their ziggurats aligned with planetary orbits, their mathematics encoded spherical geometry, and their myths disguised data as divinity. The enigma of Sumer is not their achievement, it is their memory. To stand among their ruins is to feel the vertigo of inheritance, to realize that our present rests upon misremembered equations once carved in mud. The winds still sweep over the abandoned canals, carrying whispers through broken reeds once used as writing tools. Every gust stirs dust once pressed by the thumbs of those forgotten engineers. Beneath that dust resides not only the story of humanity's beginning, but evidence of something earlier, something that taught humanity to remember through number and sky. The clay tablets hum faintly when struck by sunlight. They are not relics. They are databases waiting for someone willing to read what they dared to preserve. The Sumerian enigma remains unsolved, but perhaps the truth is simple. Civilization was never born. It was rebooted. The year is the early 16th century, and an Ottoman admiral spreads a sheet of gazelle skin parchment across his desk. The map he inks upon it will one day survive by accident, a mere fragment, the lower left corner torn and faded. Yet what remains is enough to ignite one of the deepest enigmas in cartographic history. On that scrap, amid coasts we recognize and islands we do not, lies a depiction of a landmass at the bottom of the world. A continent discovered centuries later. The map of Piri Reis does not just challenge geography, it unsettles memory itself. At first glance, the artifact appears indistinguishable from any nautical chart of its time. Compass roses, lines radiating across the ocean, annotations in Ottoman Turkish. But the detail hidden within those lines defies contemporary possibility. The coastline of South America is drawn with uncanny precision, extending far beyond what explorers in the Age of Sail could have surveyed. More confounding still is the presence of Antarctica, not as the frozen wasteland we know, but as a surveyed, ice-free continent, complete with mountain ranges, rivers, and inlets known only to radar and satellite imagery in the modern age. How could a man born into the Ottoman Empire of the 1600s possess information gathered from a vantage far older than recorded exploration? Scholars who first examined the chart in the 20th century expected crude approximations. Instead, they found geodesic correspondences so exact they required projection mathematics unknown to the 15th and 16th centuries. The map's scale is consistent with a spherical Earth calculated through longitudinal curvature rather than flat approximation. Every mile compensates for polar distortion. This technique demands not only trigonometric skill, but decades of precise astronomical observation. The conclusion is chilling. The map could not have been composed with the instruments available to its author. It was redrawn, compiled from sources of unknown antiquity. Piri Reis himself admits as much in his marginal notes. He writes of compiling from 20 older charts, some inherited from predecessors who claimed descent from the age of Alexander, even one said to have been passed down from before the Great Flood. The wording would normally be dismissed as myth-making, but in the context of modern analysis, Such myth begins to sound like fragmented testimony. If his sources were indeed ancient, then the map we hold is a palimpsest, a memory of cartography preserved through the attrition of empires, the copying of copies, the slow erosion of origin until the architecture of knowledge appears born anew. Imagine the coastal contours beneath the ice of modern Antarctica. Geological surveys using sonar have revealed the campaign of erosion from liquid water long before the ice sheets formed. The land beneath the ice cap matches, nearly perfectly, the land drawn on that map. For this to occur, whoever first charted it must have lived in an epoch when Antarctica was not yet entombed in ice, tens of thousands of years before recorded history. That time frame overlaps with the terminal Pleistocene, when humans supposedly lived as hunters and gatherers, without tools sophisticated enough even to cross oceans, let alone map them. The silence between these facts hums like an unacknowledged truth. Picture, if you will, the admiral's hand as he draws. He is not inventing coastlines. He is copying long-lost shapes. The arc of Brazil's shore, the bulge of West Africa, even islands now vanished under shifting seas. The concordance suggests his original materials were global in scope, fragments of a map that once encircled the planet. The world is seen from above, not from the deck of a ship. The precision implies either a vanished maritime tradition of staggering advancement or the inheritance of records from a civilization that mapped Earth when its face still differed from our modern geography. The of maps is both technical and philosophical. They are memory systems translated into geometry, attempts to give the sphere of the world a plainer voice. To map something is to preserve its existence beyond sight. Yet the map of Piri Reis preserves an Earth we can no longer see, the world before ice. It records not only distance but climate, coastlines sculpted by conditions preceding the Holocene. It remembers weather, it remembers loss. Each inked line whispers of another iteration of humanity whose archives melted away with the glaciers. Some historians argue that the chart could be explained by coincidence, that its accuracy is exaggerated by projection effects and interpretive bias. But detailed mathematical overlay contests that dismissal. The relative scale of Africa to South America matches ratios only achievable if both continents were plotted according to spherical coordinates. The placement of the Canary and Cape Verde Islands aligns perfectly with modern measurements across degrees of longitude. Even the depiction of the mythical island Antillia corresponds to the mid-Atlantic ridge, a feature unknown until sonar mapping in the 20th century. Statistically, coincidence collapses under probability. What remains is pattern. The presence of Antarctica, drawn not skewed along the curvature but in correct proportion, may indicate an origin from aerial or orbital perspective, an absurd suggestion for the 15th century, yet one hauntingly literal in its precision. Its mountain ranges, the Transantarctic and Queen Maud Land, appear without their icy overburden. That concession transforms the question from how Piri Reis drew them to when they were drawn first. Climate modelling suggests the last time such geography was exposed was before 12,000 years ago, around the end of the Younger Dryas cooling, when global temperatures shifted violently. The hand that first sketched those coasts belonged to witnesses of a different Earth. Imagination tempts conspiracy, but the evidence is stratigraphic. Cultures preserve knowledge through redundancy, navigation tables transforming into myths of gods crossing oceans. The Sumerians wrote of kings before the flood. The Egyptians spoke of ancestors who mapped the stars before the first dynasty. What if the Piri Reis map is to geography what ancient tablets are to mathematics, an echo, an incomplete restoration of a discipline far older than its rebirth. The admiral may have been no more than an archivist, inheriting schematics whose authors were erased by cataclysm. The idea unsettles because it reframes history as conservation, not discovery. If our maps evolved from inherited fragments, then we are not charting Earth for the first time, but updating ancient drafts. Each age redrawn atop the previous, correcting, distorting, forgetting. Knowledge deposited like sediment upon sediment. The apparent miracle of Renaissance navigation becomes, under this light, an act of remembering. The sextant and astrolabe are translations, not inventions. The ocean crossings of modernity follow trails far older than any nation-state, as if we are walking again in the footprints beneath the sea. The aesthetic of the Piri Reis map is almost bureaucratic. Annotations cramped, coordinates precise, legends meticulous. There is no flourish of imagination, no mythic beasts populating the margins, only data. It feels like a technical document misplaced in its century. Each detail reflects a discipline, angles adjusted for curvature, distances computed by ratio, coastlines corrected by verification. This is not invention, it is administration of inherited information. And that tone echoes across civilizations, the archaism of preservation disguised as innovation. The map's silence expresses rigor, it catalogues rather than paints. Consider the implications of continuity. If remnants of pre-glacial cartography persisted through oral tradition or secret archives, they would surface in fragments wherever cultures revived literacy. Maps would reappear as myths. Atlantis, the mountain rings of concentric islands, the lost southern land known to the Greek geographers as Terra Australis Incognita. Each is a shadow cast by the same memory, a continent drowned beneath ice, preserved only in outline. The Piri Reis chart may represent the last technical echo of that memory. Its creator believed he was compiling 50 generations of sailors. Perhaps he was resurfacing 500 generations of forgotten astronomers. The parallels are chilling. In the myths of nearly every maritime culture, the Maori, the Norse, the Hopi, exists a warning about a flooded world and survivors who remapped the coasts. Geological records of sudden sea level rise at the end of the last ice age confirm the event. In the silence between myth and stratigraphy, maps like that of Piri Reis become bridges, proof that storytelling and surveying once converged. The memory of ice is the memory of catastrophe, written across both stone and parchment. The map's accuracy may therefore be technical evidence of trauma remembered with obsessive precision. Imagine standing with the admiral himself, his hand trembling slightly as if obeying instruction transmitted across time. The ink lines connect continents separated by oblivion. He may not have understood their origin, yet he sensed their gravity. When he annotated his sources as originating from older times when the sea was less, perhaps he repeated words preserved by generations of seafarers tracing coastlines that memory could no longer verify. His act becomes ritual, history by reconstruction. Each stroke revives a geography the planet itself has buried. Modern analysis using computational overlays now reveals that the map's coordinate grid employs an equidistant projection centered not at the equator, but at a latitude near the Canary Islands, precisely the location once theorized as a heart of maritime diffusion in prehistory. It suggests the original source map treated that region as zero meridian long before Greenwich, implying standardized navigation protocols predating known civilization. Such precision presupposes mathematics of spherical trigonometry, the understanding of great circle routes, and measuring distances through curvature. a toolkit rediscovered only with Renaissance astronomy. The artifact, therefore, is anachronism turned evidence. To dismiss the chart as coincidence is comfortable, but comfort is not truth. The preserved fragment challenges the timeline we borrow without question. It proposes that global communication may have existed, not in mythic imagination, but in empirical geography long forgotten. The map's survival is accidental, yet its message deliberate. Knowledge, like climate, shifts irreversibly when forgotten, and we, the inheritors of that loss, misinterpret inheritance as genius. Stand quietly before the reproduction of the map now kept beneath museum glass. The edges are torn, the colours fading, yet its lines still pulse with intent. Every continent drawn is a whisper through centuries, each coordinate a translation of vanished eyes that once looked upon an unburied world. The memory of ice endures not in glaciers, but in geometry. What we call discovery may simply be resurfacing. The map waits, tracing again the contours of a planet that remembers far more than we believe. High in the Andes, where air becomes thought and silence feels carved into stone, lie ruins that reject explanation. The terraces of Sacsayhuaman rise above Cusco like frozen waves of basalt, each block cut, shaped and interlocked with the precision of a jeweler. Some weigh over 100 tons, yet fit together so seamlessly that even a blade of grass cannot slide between them. Their edges curve not mechanically, but organically, as if the stone had once been soft, moulded like clay. To walk among them is to feel the hum of intention vibrating beneath your feet, a memory embedded in the granite's grain. The Incas, according to their own tradition, did not claim to have built these walls. They said they found them, monuments erected by an earlier race of builders, the ones who could command the mountain itself. The Spanish chroniclers mocked this humility, branding it superstition. And yet, geological evidence whispers concordance with those ancient voices. Scanning the landscape, one sees unfinished blocks quarried miles away, their transport routes defying gravity and terrain. Without wheel, without pulley, without iron, how were such megaliths moved, lifted, and fused into seamless architecture? It is a question that hangs like mist in the morning air. The stones have no mortar, yet they breathe as one mechanism. Each polygonal block nests into its neighbour through interlocking indentations, a balanced choreography that absorbs earthquakes with eerie flexibility. Modern engineers study it, attempting imitation and failing. The is undeniable. These walls anticipate seismic shock absorption centuries before modern architecture. Their angles distribute resonance, their layout diffuses tension, function disguised as mystery. Whoever designed them operated with comprehension of geological stress beyond the tools of their epoch. Imagine a procession of builders, not chanting but measuring, their eyes fixed on some stellar alignment across the ridges. The fortress aligns to constellations, as if mapping the sky onto Earth. Its walls echo the outlines of Orion and the serpent constellations visible only at solstices. The entire site behaves as an observatory disguised as military structure. But the precision is too elaborate for warfare. It suggests chronology, ritual, or preservation. The mountain is both monument and metronome, keeping time across centuries through star shadow and solar angle. Further south, at Ollantaytambo, terraces climb the valley like stairways carved into memory itself. Blocks of pink porphyry, carved in geometries so precise that their corners meet at razor-thin margins, glitter faintly under dawn light. incomplete monoliths scatter around the site, as though construction stopped mid-breath, frozen after some unseen catastrophe. The quarries lie across the river and up mountains so steep that even llamas balk at the incline. The route between them would challenge modern cranes. Yet those blocks rest on high platforms as if placed by invisible suspension. The mountain should explain them, yet instead it listens. In these altitudes, silence is not absence, it is pressure. The stillness fuses sound into stone until memory reverberates. When you place your palm against the rock face, cold radiates back with a faint vibration. Listen carefully, and you can almost feel rhythm, pulses suggesting resonance, as if the structure sings when undisturbed. Researchers studying seismic frequencies at these megaliths discovered that certain chambers amplify low-frequency sound produced by wind and water through the valleys. These resonances sustain in the range of 20 to 25 Hz, below conscious hearing, yet felt in the body. The architecture manipulates atmosphere into experience. Ancient builders across the Andes exhibited an inexplicable intimacy with geology. They followed fault lines not to exploit them, but to stabilize them. Their temples perch on magnetic anomalies. At Machu Picchu, serpentine crevices channel flowing water beneath the terraces in precise courses, cooling the structure and preventing erosion. The stones breathe through these channels, maintaining equilibrium between mountain and structure. It is as if the builders conversed with the Earth's respiration itself, mapping architecture through its pulse. This is not superstition, it is engineering as communion. The question then emerges: were these techniques improvised or inherited? The progression of skill from early Andean cultures to the Inca period appears inverted. The older the structure, the finer the stonework. Later generations reproduce the pattern but lose intricacy, adding mortar, simplifying forms. The trajectory is regression, not development. Archaeological typologies assume evolution, yet stratigraphy whispers degeneration. The earliest builders command mastery, the later imitate. It is civilization running in reverse, as if memory were evaporating stone by stone. Imagine walking through the inner corridors of a site like Puma Punku, high on the Bolivian Altiplano. The elevation strains your breath. The horizon curves beneath identical precision-cut blocks, scattered like shattered code. Each stone bears grooves, drill holes, and right angles too perfect for primitive chisels. Their composition, diorite and andesite, demands tools harder than steel. The surfaces are milled smooth, machine flat to within millimeters. The air carries the metallic tang of age. These were not random slabs. They are fragments of an assembly we no longer understand. Displacement caused by an ancient seismic shock or flood shattered them, yet their geometry endures as instruction manual without translation. The ruins whisper of scale. They describe operations of collective understanding, knowledge applied synchronously across thousands of hands, but coordinated by one underlying principle. In the absence of written record, the stone became the text. Every groove and indentation is a letter in a long-vanished language of engineering. Through reflection and resonance, the builders annotated their environment. Their monuments are the equivalent of data centers carved from rock, repositories that archived geometry, sound, vibration, and time. To read them demands the sensitivity to recognize architecture as algorithm. Local records recount Viracocha, the luminous god who created humanity after a great flood, who taught his children to quarry and carve, and who departed across the Pacific. He is myth, of course, but myth has sediment. Within it might hide the collective memory of instructors from a prior epoch, survivors of a civilization drowned by climatic collapse, who preserved fragments of their in-stone before silence overtook them. Across continents, their echoes repeat, the same teacher, different names. In Mesopotamia, he was Enki. In Egypt, Thoth. In Mesoamerica, Quetzalcoatl. Each culture describes a phase shift from survival to instruction, followed by disappearance. Always water, always memory. The concept of soft stone surfaces resurfaces in local legends. Elder tribes speak of a plant whose sap could dissolve rock, allowing sculptors to mold rather than chisel. Some dismissed it as imagination, yet residue of unknown chemical compound stains, quarry walls, as if heat or reaction fluid once burned through mineral bonds. Geological analysis identifies vitrification, surfaces melted smooth under intense heat without charring surroundings. The phenomenon puzzles scientists. No primitive fire can reach such consistent temperatures without destroying the stone entirely. It is technology, but what kind? We romanticize the notion of the isolated Inca, inventing from nothing their miracles of masonry. But the stone says otherwise. The genetic and linguistic footprints of Andean cultures trace migrations from much older periods, converging toward the same highlands long before the classical era. The people who built these walls may have been custodians of an older craft, protectors of formulas instead of inventors of them. The megalithic language they used, angularity, vibration, resonance, was less symbolic, more operational. They were encoding infrastructure for endurance. These structures were built not to impress, but to instruct. Earthquakes have tested them through centuries, yet they endure. Whole cities built in their shadow have crumbled while these stone puzzles remain unfazed, joints shifting subtly and returning. They are not ruins, but survivors. Each tremor confirms their purpose, equilibrium between destruction and resilience. The architecture itself breathes, contracting and releasing energy like the lungs of the planet. That is why standing before such a wall feels like standing before consciousness carved in mineral. It is alive in the slow pulse of tectonic time. Consider the theory of lost templates, blueprints engraved in myth, geometry transposed globally. The angles at Sacsayhuaman mirror those at Giza and Angkor, the ratios of base to height, repeating numbers encoded in planetary motion. Coincidence is possible once, pattern multiplies certainty. Across disciplines, geology, mathematics, mythology, these correspondences converge. Either civilizations separated by oceans stumbled upon identical equations of proportion, or they inherited them from a shared source preceding written history. The Andes in this scenario become not origin, but archive. Standing amid the terraces, every sound carries weight. The whisper of wind through the high valleys threads between stones like a tuning fork, vibrating across epochs. The melody is more than ambience. It is translation. The walls store resonance the way servers store data. What we hear as echo may be signal. Ancient builders understood something we have forgotten. Vibration is information. Each wall, tuned to frequency, preserved alignment with Earth's tonal signature, perhaps mitigating catastrophe or preserving coherence during the chaos of climate reversal. Architecture as protection, not shelter. As the sun sets, shadows stretch long across the zigzagging walls. The stones glow golden, reflecting a warmth that defies their cold age. The city below still follows their orientation, streets echoing seques, ritual lines that emanate from the temple at Cusco, aligning valleys and horizons into a calibration matrix. It is as if urban planning itself reverberated with sacred geometry. The people no longer remember why the lines matter, only that they must be honored. Memory stripped of understanding becomes ritual. Ritual stripped of context becomes silence. Perhaps this is the truest function of these Andean echoes, to remind us that civilization is not built upon progress, but recurrence. The cyclical heartbeat of the earth demands witnesses who carve its pulse into permanence. The builders beneath the Andes understood collapse not as failure, but as renewal. They built for those who would come after the silence. Every interlocked stone, every measured curve is a statement left for the resurrected, to show that knowledge is not lost when remembered in matter. It simply waits, humming beneath the mountains, patient as stone. The desert at Giza is not silent. It hisses softly with the shifting of sand grains, each one older than the memory of empire. At its center crouches the Sphinx, its body half buried, its face eroded by time yet still defiant. To the casual eye, it is a guardian of the pyramids, a monument to kingship. But beneath its leonine calm lies a geological argument, one that whispers that the statue's origins are far older than Egypt itself. The stone does not tell fairy tales, it keeps climate in archive. For centuries, the Sphinx has been interpreted through iconography, its face that of a pharaoh, its form symbolic of divine order. Yet the body refuses the timeline carved for it by historians. Where the desert wind leaves angular scars, the Sphinx's flanks are carved in sweeps, rounded grooves that descend like the remnants of falling water. Geologists studying these patterns recognize a different author, rain, not wind. And rain in quantities like these last kissed this plateau not thousands, but tens of thousands of years ago, when the Sahara was still green. The face of the Sphinx then peers not into pharaonic Egypt, but into prehistory itself. Stand before it in the early light, when the limestone gleams pale gold. The monument seems alive, breathing with the desert's exhale. The erosion on its chest and enclosure walls arcs vertically, as if shaped by sheets of rainfall over centuries. Stratigraphic analysis reveals channels deepened by consistent water flow, not storm or wind abrasion. Those lines cut through harder and softer layers indiscriminately, a hallmark of precipitation. If true, this single detail would reorder the understanding of civilization's timeline. The Sphinx would precede pharaohs by millennia. It would be their inheritance, not their creation. The implication is profound. For rainfall to sculpt the bedrock in such a pattern, the region's climate must have been far wetter, a condition last present at the end of the Pleistocene epoch. During that time, when ice still crowned the poles and the Nile's valley bloomed, humans were assumed to be primitive wanderers. Yet if this monument existed then, it was built by hands capable of architectural and symbolic vision during an age officially devoid of such sophistication. In the language of stone, the Sphinx becomes a fossil of memory, recording a civilization erased by the desiccation of time. Imagine an ancient horizon where rainstorms swept over a fertile Egyptian plain. The builders who carved the Sphinx may have gazed upon a green desert, the Nile broader and more volatile than today. They may have watched storms coil like serpents over the western plateau, lightning revealing limestone cliffs slick with runoff. Their monument, half lion, half human, could have symbolized dominion not over sand, but over the chaos of water. a sentinel watching the transition between epochs. If so, it marks the threshold between worlds, the end of the age of rain and the birth of the age of dust. When modern Egyptologists encounter this claim, they balk. The dynastic chronology is robust, framed by thousand-year sequences of king lists, carbon dating, and inscriptions. But geology is not political. It erodes authority as easily as it erases stone. The fissures on the Sphinx's enclosure walls, extending meters deep, cut through layers sealed since early antiquity. They cannot result from mere wind-blown sand, whose abrasion is lateral, not vertical. The debate becomes less about interpretation and more about listening. The Sphinx is not arguing, it is remembering. Another layer of the mystery lies within the head itself. The body's erosion signals immense age, but the proportions of the face seem discordant, as if recarved. Measurements reveal that the head is too small relative to its torso, implying that an earlier visage was reshaped to bear royal features. If true, the Sphinx may once have worn another identity, lost beneath the cosmetic reconstruction of later dynasties. The repair work performed by ancient restorers suggests reverence for something already ancient in their time. The pharaoh's sculptor did not create. He translated an artifact from myth back into history. Under the Sphinx lies silence layered in stone. Seismic soundings beneath its pores reveal cavities, hollow chambers, geometric in boundary. Whether natural fissures or deliberate vaults remains uncertain. If deliberate, who carved them, and for what? Some hypothesize they were repositories of records, echoing traditions of a lost hall of knowledge. If verified, it would suggest the Sphinx functioned not as idol, but archive, its body a tomb for data. The silence waiting under its weight is the equivalent of unread script, a coded inheritance entombed by dust. The geological fingerprint of the Sphinx echoes anomalies at other global sites. Similar rain erosion patterns appear on megaliths in Turkey's Göbekli Tepe, also dated to epochs predating agriculture. The style parallels even the basalt statues of Bolivia, where tropical rainfall once cut channels before aridity consumed them. The implication is unsettling. A global climate shift may have buried not merely land, but history. Monuments from disparate continents whisper of a shared trauma, the drying of the world, and the silence that followed. The surrounding plateau participates in the same dissonance. Blocks at the Sphinx temple, carved from identical limestone layers, weigh up to 200 tons apiece. They are laid in courses of mathematical precision, each block leveling to the next within millimeters. Such engineering in a supposedly nascent culture rivals modern tolerances. The quarry from which they were cut lies directly beside the monument itself, implying contemporaneous creation. Whoever built the Sphinx commanded both artistic symbolism and technical mastery, qualities that do not emerge from trial but from tradition. Imagine now the flood that myths describe, the sea that swallowed cities, the rain that lasted seasons beyond counting. In that transient deluge, structures like the Sphinx were not being created, but surviving. They rose from the mud as reminders of order amid dissolution. The universal memory of flood across global mythology may not be metaphor, but record. Each story an echo of the time when the climate changed violently and whole worlds disappeared beneath sediment. The Sphinx, therefore, is not just monument. It is survivor, fossil, confession. Close your eyes and listen to the wind passing between the monument's weathered pores. It carries a tone, low, mournful, steady. Sound engineers measuring the resonance between the pores found harmonic vibrations differing subtly from open desert. the monument hums. Whether by accident or design, it sings in sympathy with the same frequencies found in megalithic chambers around the world. Perhaps the ancients understood resonance not as curiosity but as key, a stabilizing vibration that kept structures harmonized with planetary rhythm. The Sphinx may literally hum with memory. The head, facing east, greets the rising sun on the equinoxes. Its alignment is too precise for happenstance. Across millennia, despite tectonic shifts and erosion, this celestial orientation remains constant. In that frozen gaze, astronomy and mythology converge. The Sphinx observes the rebirth of Ra each morning, its body embodying Earth, its face the mind intertwined with the sky. The duality is deliberate, part beast, part intellect, the fusion of and consciousness. An image not of human tyranny, but of guardianship, of a civilization determined to preserve balance between elements. There is a loneliness in the statue's endurance. The desert recedes, the air grows hotter, yet the Sphinx remains, half exposed, half submerged in time. Restoration after restoration attempts to preserve its form, but in doing so, human hands overwrite evidence of its age. The layers of plaster and stone disguise history, the same way rewritten chronologies disguise origin. Each patch repairs a wound while erasing a clue. Modern preservation, like dynastic restoration, risks numbing the monument's silence by silencing it further. The rain theory does not demand belief. It demands humility. If the Sphinx is indeed older, then civilization's horizon retreats further into shadow, toward a time when humanity grasped both geometry and reverence, technology and myth in equal measure. The plateau becomes archive, and the statue, a signature left by those who knew water's violence and sought to speak beyond it. To question the official record, then, is not rebellion. It is listening to stone with geologic patience. Truth erodes slowly, but never disappears. The world around the Sphinx continues to change, just as it has for tens of millennia. Tourists stream where oceans once may have reached, cameras flashing where once thunder rolled. The monument endures all interpretations: royal emblem, astronomical marker, survivor of the flood. Perhaps it is all of them. Its silence is vast enough to contain contradictions. Beneath the streaks of rain-cut stone lies a challenge spoken without words. Can we bear to remember a world older than our imagination allows? When night falls over Giza, the stars emerge like notes inscribed on invisible parchment. The Sphinx's face tilts subtly upward, as if contemplating the same stars whose reflections glittered in the Nile's wider ancient bed. Beneath that celestial gaze, the sand settles. Time thickens. The statue does not sleep. It endures, dreaming of rain. In its stillness, it carries the memory of water, the tremor of life before silence, the echo of civilizations washed away. For those who pause in its presence, it does not speak. It waits, whispering to the wind that truth, like erosion, always finds its way through stone. Across the ancient world, there exist chambers where silence is never absolute. When you stand within their walls, the air shivers faintly, vibrating with frequencies too low for the ear, yet so profound the body responds. From the hypogea of Malta to the subterranean sanctuaries of Egypt, from stone circles in Britain to monolithic caves in the Andes, the builders tuned their monuments not merely for sight, but for sound. Stone in these contexts was not passive material, but instrument. Each wall was an ear, each vault a resonator, each corridor a note in an architecture of vibration. In a small temple hewn from limestone on the island of Malta, archaeologists discovered an impossible phenomenon. When a human voice sings or chants at precisely 110 hertz, the air itself begins to resonate. The vibration amplifies exponentially, pulsing through the bones of the listener, creating rhythmic interference patterns that slow heart rate and alter brain waves. This was not accident. The chamber's dimensions, curvature, and mineral density all conspire to sustain that frequency, a frequency that matches the resonance of the human thorax. The temple thus becomes an extension of anatomy, the stone body singing with the flesh. Imagine ritual participants standing within the dim red hue of torchlight, their chants converging into standing waves that swirl invisibly around them. To the untrained eye, it would appear supernatural, the walls vibrating, sand shifting on the floor, bones humming in synchrony. Yet it is carved into stone. The architects of this temple knew that geometry could govern sound the way equations govern celestial movement. Their knowledge predates recorded acoustics by millennia, yet replicates its mathematics with uncanny precision. The result is an acoustic technology that manipulates consciousness directly through resonance. The same pattern appears in Egypt's temples and pyramidal chambers. Voices chanting within the king's chamber produce low-frequency standing waves that echo indefinitely. Measurements show frequency peaks identical to those found in the Maltese hypogeum, 110 Hz, with harmonics at multiples matching the resonant frequencies of the planet itself. Whether coincidence or inheritance, the pattern remains. It suggests an ancient continuity of understanding, that sound and matter are reflections of one principle, and sacred architecture served as its tuning fork. The ancients did not build tombs, they built laboratories of vibration. In the modern world, we segment disciplines: architecture, physics, music. For the ancients, these were facets of the same art. The word for temple in several early languages carries root meanings of both measurement and tone. They perceived reality as harmonic structure, a symphony of frequencies. To them, stone was not barrier but conduit, capable of storing energy like the resonance of a bell. When struck or sung into alignment, the structure itself awakened, participating in ritual by amplifying intention. In that sense, the mysterious rites were concert, meditation, and experiment all at once. At the heart of this mystery lies the standing waves. When sound encounters walls arranged by proportion, it synchronizes with them in reinforcement or cancellation. Ancient builders learned through observation what physics would only later explain. Precise ratios between length, width, and height dictate resonance phenomena. The sacred ratio, often near 1 to 2 to 3, appears in chambers worldwide. Its consonance reduces dissonance, creating a self-sustaining echo that wraps around participants like invisible cloth. Geometry was their calibration code, sacredness their metric. In Malta's temples, the echoes seem to carry intention across space. Whispered speech from the central apse can be heard perfectly in distant corridors, yet disappears halfway, as though the sound travels selectively. This acoustic mirage could not have been accidental. It implies that ancient architects mapped pathways not for light, but for vibration. Rituals performed there may have depended on manipulating these invisible waves, chants timed to resonate with the structure's pulse, participants aligning breath and heart rhythm with architectural frequency. The temple thus transformed human rhythm into geological echo. Some ancient cultures described creation itself as sound. The Egyptian priests called it the word that became the world. In Sumeria, the gods spoke existence into form. The Vedic hymns of India describe sound as both weapon and womb of reality. Across civilizations, the motif recurs, vibration giving rise to matter. In this context, tuning chambers of resonance becomes an act of remembering, the reconstruction of Genesis through harmonic mimicry. The temple is not a house of gods, it is the reenactment of creation's first utterance. Each chant, a recalibration of cosmos and flesh. Archaeologists often find niches and cavities carved into these structures, dismissed as symbolic or functional for torches. Yet acousticians testing them find they act as harmonic amplifiers, augmenting specific frequencies while muting others. When air moves through them, they whistle at tonal intervals. Multiply these cavities, and the building becomes a giant resonant instrument, one that the initiate learned to play through voice alone. The architecture listens back, responding. From that dialogue between human and material, transcendence is manufactured. In Central America, the temples of the Maya exhibit similar acoustic features. A hand clap before the pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza produces an echo mimicking the chirp of a sacred bird. The effect, measurable through modern equipment, arises from precise stair geometry, acting as phased reflector array. Whether purely symbolic or deeply functional, the effect reveals that ancient architects were deliberate manipulators of sound. Even in absence of shared contact, the knowledge converges, as if all across the globe, civilizations were rediscovering the same correspondence between shape and tone, matter and meaning. The resonant frequencies prevalent among megalithic sites often fall within ranges known to influence human biology. Alpha and theta brain waves oscillate between 4 and 11 Hz, conducive to trance and vision. Lower vibrations between 1 and 10 Hz correspond to Schumann resonances, the electromagnetic pulse of Earth's atmosphere. If temples amplify those frequencies, their attendees were literally synchronizing with the planet. Architecture then becomes a feedback loop between body and world, uniting observer with environment. To experience that harmony was not superstition, it was technology for consciousness. What remains unclear is whether this mastery was discovered empirically or inherited from an older epoch. Creation myths consistently attribute sacred sound to divine teachers who instructed humans in the spoken geometries of the world. Their artifacts fade, but their principles persist. The correlation between architecture and resonance appears too universal to be coincidence, too sophisticated to be naive experimentation. Civilization may have re-emerged after cataclysm, remembering only fragments, stone ratios without language, frequencies without formulas. Yet even fragments can sing if arranged correctly. Imagine descending into one of these chambers at night. The air presses heavy, laden with echoes of chants long ceased. You hum softly, and the stone answers, magnifying your voice until it feels detached from your body. The vibration travels up your spine, inducing calm yet awakening inner sound. The experience transcends religion. It is pure interaction, geometry shaping consciousness. When the builders engineered this effect, they engineered empathy, the dissolving of separation between self and universe. The temple is the machine of remembrance, reuniting soul and stone through waveform. Consider the material choices: granite, basalt, limestone. Each rock type possesses distinct acoustic impedance. Where one amplifies low-end vibration, another sustains high tones. The builders combined them deliberately, as though composing harmonic chords in physical form. Polished surfaces reflect sound, rough ones absorb it. The rhythmic layering of materials turns architecture into recording device. To this day, audio engineers can replicate their effects only approximately. The ancients tuned entire landscapes, not merely rooms. Valleys, wells, and natural caves often form harmonic networks connected by resonance. In the Hypogea's main chamber, measurements show that a single note sustained for 7 seconds can cause dust to lift from the floor and swirl in geometric spirals. The vibration patterns captured through visualization mirror the mathematical forms known as cymatics, shapes generated by frequency. The same principle used in modern laboratories existed implicitly in ancient stone. When priests or initiates intoned sacred names, they were tracing geometries in the air, converting knowledge into experience. What they found in those resonant moments may have been less vision than revelation, a direct perception of the structure of reality itself. Modern instruments confirm the physiological effects. Exposure to prolonged low-frequency resonance alters neural activity, inducing altered perception of time and self. Ancient participants did not label this as brainwave entrainment. They experienced it as union with the divine. Their temples were immersive technologies, carefully calibrated to erode the boundary between observer and observed. The profound calm that follows resonance explains why many initiation chambers were isolated deep within rock, shielded from external noise. Silence was not emptiness, it was medium for vibrational truth. The repetition of the 110 Hz frequency across distant sites may not be symbolic convergence but practical necessity. That number represents a harmonic, born from the natural resonance of the human frame, the standing wavelength of breath within the thoracic cavity. To sing at that pitch is to make your body and the world harmonize. The builders understood this crosspoint intuitively. They designed sacred spaces where that frequency could live forever, long after their voices faded. Every echo through their corridors is a replay of the same universal chord. We stand now among remnants deaf to their intent, calling them tombs or fortresses. Yet if you strike the walls, they speak. Their tones persist, unwavering, patient. The lesson endures. Sound is memory. Frequency encodes emotion. Geometry preserves principle. What we name mystery was once methodology. To listen is to begin to understand. When the last chant faded in those ancient halls, the resonance lingered for minutes, perhaps hours before rising into the atmosphere. That sound, lost now to human hearing, still travels outward as a ripple through the fabric of the planet, intersecting our cities, our hearts, our machines. The echoes of these temples blend with the hum of Earth itself. The builders may be gone, but their song continues, vibrating at the edge of silence, reminding us that the universe speaks first not through light, but through sound. There are places on this planet where the horizon itself feels deliberate. Not accidental, not natural, but calibrated, aligned to the stars. Across deserts and jungles, across continents that history claims were isolated from one another, ancient builders erected monuments that mirror the movements of heaven. They watched light, shadow, and constellation, fixing their stones to a cosmic rhythm beyond the reach of mythology. They were not merely observers, they were astronomers of eternity. The architects of the sky did not work for kings, they worked for time itself. begin in Turkey, on a hill called Göbekli Tepe. 12,000 years before now, hunter-gatherers are said to have carved monoliths twice their height, weighing up to 20 tons, and arranged them in circles oriented to cardinal directions. Within those circles, reliefs of fox, vulture, and serpent act not as decoration, but as codex, symbols of constellations lost in the shuffle of precession. The site predates agriculture, yet its geometry matches precise stellar configurations of the Summer Triangle and Orion's Belt as they appeared at the end of the Younger Dryas. This alignment implies astronomical knowledge spanning millennia of observational continuity. It means someone was recording the heavens long before we built cities to do the same. The builders of Göbekli Tepe did something even stranger. They buried their creation. After centuries of use, the site was carefully entombed under layers of soil and rubble, as though protecting its geometry from the erasure of time. The act feels ceremonial, deliberate, and suspiciously like preservation. What could compel a people to conceal knowledge that defined their identity? Perhaps the same catastrophe that drowned other civilizations, the same flood remembered in every culture, a resetting of the stars above and the earth below. To bury a monument is to send a message forward in time, the only direction left when the sky itself begins to change. Now trace the line west, to Egypt once more. The three pyramids of Giza stand not random but resonant, their alignment corresponding to the Orion constellation, specifically the line of its belt stars. The match is not aesthetic, it is mathematical. The ratio between their spacing corresponds precisely to angular distances as observed from the Nile River during the epoch around 10,500 years before Christ. That date recurs, the same window that marks the end of global glaciation, the rise of flood myths, the reconfiguration of the sky through axial precession. Why would Bronze Age architects encode a pattern visible only in a sky that existed millennia before their reign? They were measuring memory. The Nile itself mirrors the Milky Way, a terrestrial replica of the cosmic river that the ancients perceived as the source of life. To walk along its banks was to tread between worlds, the earthly and the celestial. Each temple, each pyramid, positioned as coordinate upon that map, transformed the landscape into an observatory. You could say Egypt was less a kingdom and more an instrument, a planetary astrolabe marking the rhythm of cosmic cycles. Its structure was knowledge disguised as devotion, its rituals rehearsals for the dance of the heavens. Across the ocean in Mexico, another civilization lifted its eyes to the same stars. Teotihuacan, with its Avenue of the Dead, aligns to the setting of the Pleiades, a cluster that ancient astronomers worldwide associated with rebirth and destruction. The city's grid tilts 15 degrees from true north, matching a celestial orientation rather than terrestrial convenience. The Pyramid of the Sun, when measured, encodes ratios equivalent to planetary orbits known only through modern mechanics. The city itself may have been designed as a working cosmogram, a three-dimensional model of the universe, both mirror and hypothesis. For its builders, architecture was astronomy frozen into geometry. At the opposite end of the earth, the ruins of Stonehenge echo the same principle. The circle of sarsen stones forms a calendar of solstice, equinox, and lunar cycle, anticipating eclipses through alignment of shadow. Its construction spanned centuries, each addition refining the instrument toward greater precision. The Neolithic engineers who raised those stones understood not only the rhythm of light, but its irregularities, the slow drift of the sun's rise along the horizon, caused by precession of the equinoxes, a dance of 26,000 years. To encode this into stone is to perceive time itself as architecture, not narrative. Imagine for a moment the patience required. Generations building for a celestial event that none would live to see. Their lives measured not by years, but by degrees of arc. The passing of time became measurable only through the returning of shadows. To carve alignment into matter was to confront mortality, to ensure that even after flesh turned to dust, the design would remain synchronized with the cosmos. They gave their monuments immortality through mathematics. The architects of stone built to defy forgetting. Astronomical alignments appear even where cult and culture diverge. The Nazca lines of Peru, vast geoglyphs stretching over parched desert, mark galactic coordinates and solstice sunrises rather than roads or borders. Their lines converge on horizon points that align with star clusters visible only from that latitude during certain centuries. Viewed from the air, they form symbols of flight, constellations and movement, encoded sky maps etched into the Earth itself. The builders needed no satellites. They had patience, method, and the humility to watch the heavens longer than modern eyes could bear. Their mathematics were not written, but walked. What binds all these observatories together is precession, the slow wobble of Earth's axis, tracing a circle in the heavens every 26,000 years. The phenomenon shifts the position of stars over epochs, subtly transforming the celestial backdrop of our lives. Recognizing precession demands long-term observation, records preserved and transmitted accurately across generations. Conventional history grants that credit to the Greeks of the classical period, yet the stones themselves declare otherwise. Ancient builders not only observed the precessional cycle, they built to mark its phases, embedding temporal drift into architecture so future ages might recalibrate the calendar of the world. Take, for example, the Temple of Angkor Wat in Cambodia. Its vast courtyards aligned to solstitial sunrises and equinox shadows, while reliefs carved upon its walls depict celestial cycles consistent with the same precessional constants observed at Giza and Teotihuacan. Its central tower mirrors the coordinates of Draco's pole star during an earlier epoch, suggesting that the builders preserved an ancient stellar reference later forgotten. The formula repeats. Orientation to stars displaced thousands of years before the culture's recorded existence. These civil engineers were restoring diagrams older than their civilization itself. What could motivate this global obsession with aligning to the cosmos? Perhaps survival. Ancient myths speak of cataclysm tied to the sky, of suns that rose in wrong places, of stars falling, of the world realigned by fire or flood. For a people living after catastrophe, rediscovering the pattern of the heavens meant restoring order on Earth. The temples thus became stabilizers of memory, annual reminders that the universe still followed law, that chaos had an architecture, and that humanity was part of it. The act of alignment was therapy, as if by matching heaven's rhythm, humanity could avoid repeating its own collapse. In this interpretation, the sky was scripture and procession, its verse. Each age, Taurus, Aries, Pisces, marked not mythic cycles but measurable epochs. The rise of each constellation in the east signaled civilizational transitions, encoded later as astrological eras. Modern calls these coincidences of perception. Antiquity treated them as covenants. The builders aligned their stones to these cosmic handovers, ensuring that posterity could read continuity through catastrophe. If their monuments endured, their calendar of existence would remain legible long after language failed. Look now at the precision of their craft. Astronomers mapping the Great Pyramid's corridors have found that shafts once pointed to Polaris's predecessor, Thuban, aligned perfectly during the same epoch when Orion's belt matched the pyramid trio. Over thousands of years, those alignments shifted, yet the geometry preserved the memory. The structure, therefore, operates as a fixed data point in an ever-changing sky, a cosmic timestamp anchored in limestone. Its purpose may have been nothing less than to signal across millennia the last time humanity truly knew the heavens. Our ancestors built not temples, but hard drives in stone. They encoded numbers sacred to precession, 26,000, 1,720, 72, all factors in the arithmetic of time. Across cultures, those numbers recur, disguised as ages of kings, reigns of gods, or cycles of destruction and rebirth. The resonance is mathematical, not mythological. Whoever first measured the wobble of the world wrote that knowledge into legend to ensure its survival when fell into silence. Each alignment we rediscover is not revelation, but recognition. Even today, as satellites chart the stars automatically, we stand beneath a heritage of design we barely comprehend. Modern observers call these alignments coincidence, relic of superstition. But what superstition endures to the arc-minute of celestial accuracy? What myth arranges entire cities to map constellations long gone from view? Skepticism, though valuable, falters before such consistency. The stones insist. They do not preach, they remind. As twilight deepens over the plateau of Giza, Orion rises again. His 3 stars gleam, offset perfectly above the pyramids, his belt reflected in geometry etched into the desert's heart. The same vision glimmers behind the jaguar temples of the Maya, the circles of Stonehenge, and the buried sanctuaries of Anatolia. In that alignment lives a memory older than written time, a whisper from the architects of the sky, echoing through light years of night. It urges only that we remember how our ancestors measured divinity, not in belief, but in precision. For them, the act of aligning meant belonging. Perhaps that is what we have lost. We no longer build to mark the heavens. We build to eclipse them with light. Cities glow where stars once guided, and our calendars count days divorced from celestial rhythm. Yet the monuments endure, patient, aligned still with the turning cosmos. They are instruments waiting for ears attuned enough to hear their silent timing. When one day humanity again looks upward with wonder instead of conquest, the message will be waiting, carved into stone, written across horizons, constant against the drift of forgetfulness. The sky remembers what we do not. Every civilization begins with an ending. Before the rise of any city, there is the residue of something drowned. Flood is the first chapter of our collective story, written not in ink but in silt, layered thick beneath our feet. From Mesopotamia to the Yucatan, from the mountains of Tibet to the plains of North America, the same tale returns. The waters came, swallowed the world, and when the tide retreated, a handful of survivors carried memory like an ember through extinction. The flood is not myth. It is the sedimentary memory of trauma. Imagine the world at the edge of the last ice age. Vast glaciers melt under a sky bruised with storms, sea levels rising at a rate our modern coastlines can scarcely imagine. Islands vanish, mountains collapse, river deltas drown. The sound of the world is water roaring over stone. In these moments of planetary thaw, humanity watches the dissolution of memory. the erasure of everything familiar. When later generations whisper the word flood, they are naming that silence, the wound left in the archive of the planet. Geologists describe it clinically: rapid meltwater pulses, abrupt transitions, microfossil displacement. Yet beneath data lies awe. Cores drilled from the Greenland ice sheet reveal isotopic signatures of a sudden collapse around 12 millennia ago. Oceanographers chart ancient shorelines hundreds of meters below the surface, where now fish swim through what were once forests. Archaeologists uncover settlements inexplicably abandoned as if flight were instant. The pattern repeats too often to ignore. Across continents, civilizations' roots begin not in invention, but in retrieval after submersion. In Mesopotamia's oldest stories, the gods decide the flood, but the survivor writes the chronicle. A tablet, misfired yet immortal, recounts the man who saved seeds of knowledge in a vessel of reparation. Centuries later, the same narrative surfaces among the Hebrews, the Greeks, the Hindus, the Maya, each a translation of a geological catastrophe. The waters are local yet universal, the judgment and renewal metaphoric yet stratigraphic. The deluge is both physical and metaphysical, an act of the Earth's climate and of humanity's conscience. We are, all of us, descendants of those who remembered. When sea levels rose over 400 feet, coastlines reshaped themselves. What were once valleys became gulf floors, and ancient ports turned to reefs. Beneath the waves off Japan's Yonaguni Island, terraces and stairways whisper of craft and geometry. Perhaps a city erased too fast for decay. In the Bay of Cambay, divers recover pottery and tool fragments older than the first recognized civilization. Across the Atlantic, sonar reveals stone avenues beneath the Caribbean. Whether misinterpreted or authentic, their message is the same. The ocean is the greatest archaeologist, and its library lies sealed in blue stillness. To speak of flood is to speak of renewal. The world that perished gave rise to re-civilization, a younger humanity inheriting traces of its ancestor. The myths do not tell of creation, but of reconstruction. In Sumer, kingship descends from heaven after the waters subside. In Egypt, the first rulers are said to have emerged from a mound of silt left by the inundation. The Maya counted time from the rebirth of the fourth sun, a cosmic reboot after deluge. Our calendars begin not at the start of the world, but after its death. Consider the survivors. They are described as engineers, as priests, as godlike beings who recolonize the earth, teaching the stunned remnants how to measure, plant, and build. Their presence across mythology is unnervingly consistent. Always they appear from the sea, bearing symbols of knowledge. The fishman Oans, the Viracocha emerging bearded from Lake Titicaca, the serpentine Quetzalcoatl crossing the Gulf. They are interpreters of lost knowledge returning to rebuild. Maybe not gods, but archaeologists of their own fallen world. What we call civilization may merely be the aftershock of remembrance. The flood erased the original cities, but their mathematics, architecture, and stories persisted as salvage. A people remembering through ritual how to be human again after cataclysm would encode that trauma into myth. The astronomical calendars, megalithic observatories, and sudden technical competence found at the dawn of recorded history are not beginnings. They are recovery files. Humanity was not learning. It was restoring what little of the archive survived the water. Stratigraphy supports the memory. Beneath every great delta lies a layer of sterile clay, deposited suddenly before the next sedimentation of life. Between those layers, bone and charcoal mark populations cut short. The pattern is geological punctuation. In the Gulf of Oman, marine cores reveal abrupt influxes of fresh water from deglaciation. In the Black Sea, salinity shifts record the moment when Mediterranean waters breached the Bosporus. Around the same epoch, myths of floods multiply, speaking identical chronologies in different tongues. The stones validate the songs. The trauma also lives in language. Words for ocean and abyss share etymological root with chaos and void. The Mesopotamian apsu, the Greek chaos, the Hebrew tehom, all describe the same abyssal depth where order drowns. Across millennia, poets translated hydrology into theology. But their laments were more than literary. They were reports. When the sky darkened with vapor and the seas climbed towards sacred ground, myth was the only vocabulary left to name the planetary erosion of certainty. To write the flood was to stabilize memory. The rise of the flood myths coincides with humanity's obsession with measurement. Time, depth, and season become sacred after deluge because water had once erased them. The invention of calendars, ziggurats, and high temples was not reverence. It was insurance. If the sky turned again, they would know the warning. The alignment of structures to celestial and tidal cycles served as survival script. To remember the flood was to prevent forgetting the symptoms of its return. Memory became the only seawall worth building. Yet the flood was not only water. It was cosmic change, a tilt, a pulse of the planet, a gravitational recalibration. Ice melted not gently but catastrophically, perhaps triggered by external impact or solar fluctuation. The Earth adjusted, stumbling on its axis, continents sighing under redistributed weight. The languages of gods and comets blur under that violence. When the survivors spoke of divine wrath or celestial fire, they may have been describing the physics of extinction as experienced by mythic perception. Truth disguised as parable, trauma encoded as theology. Modern scholars attempt to separate story from, yet the boundary dissolves like shoreline under tide. Other unrelated myths describe not cleaning water, but dark skies, ash, and freezing cold preceding the deluge. Perhaps an impact winter preceded the melt, a chain reaction of climate collapse. The people who survived saw cause and consequence blurred. The ice melted, then the waters rose, then dawn returned to a reshaped earth. Every step was incomprehensible. They mythologized what they could not survive awake. Consider now how the survivors handled knowledge. Their first act was not to build cities, but to canonize memory. They drew maps of pre-flood skies, encoded flood depths in measure, carved calendars in stone dense enough to outlast recalibration. They wrote in survival units of thousands, sars, yugas, suns, numbers adequate only to geological rhythm. By doing so, they ensured that future generations would inherit a warning system disguised as mythology. The message is simple: as above, so below. When the heavens shift, so will the seas. Every continent bears ruins whose lowest strata show evidence of ancient inundation. Erosion by salt water creeps into mountain stone. Fossils of marine creatures appear hundreds of miles inland, entombed with flint tools. In the Andean highlands, shells are found woven into ceremonial burials, carried from distant oceans by those who remembered what water could do. In caves of the Caucasus, charcoal layers alternate with fine silt, the visual signature of flooding followed by fire. The Earth's crust is a poem of drowning written in parallel lines. Perhaps that is why the flood myth persists, because it is the closest humanity has come to remembering geological truth. It warns that civilization is fragile equilibrium, that comfort is temporary pact with weather. Every levee, every dam, every wall is built against history's favorite weapon. The flood, literal or metaphorical, always returns. It is the ghost of time, testing how deeply memory runs. Forget, and water becomes teacher again. Now imagine centuries after the final rains, when deserts spread where lakes once shimmered. The survivors, their myths crystallized into religion and architecture, begin to rebuild. They erect pyramids as ascension markers, towers as lighthouses in case the sea ever returns. The flood is gone, yet they live as if standing on its edge, transmitting subtle panic through geometry. Even their gods carry water in their stories. Even their tongues taste of salt. Civilization is merely dry land carved inside a storm's memory. Beneath the Earth's calm surface, glaciers still breathe. The oceans rise inch by inch in delayed echo. Our satellites take the measurements, but not the warning. The ancient storytellers watch us from their ruins, their message unaltered. Catastrophe is not anomaly, it is rhythm. Our challenge is not to prevent it, but to remember it clearly enough that we survive it with meaning intact. The deluge will come again, in water, in fire, in silence. When it does, let the stones we build speak for us as theirs once did. For the world is circular like the sea itself. Beginning and ending are illusions shaped by perspective. What rose from floodwater once will one day return to it. The archive of the earth turns slowly, patient as tide, erasing and inscribing at will. The question is not whether we will drown, but whether, when the surface closes over us again, we will have left behind a memory strong enough to float. The flood never ended. It only waits for us to notice that the shore beneath our feet is still wet with yesterday's rain. Every civilization tells itself that it will be the last, that its towers will outlast the wind, that its archives will drift into eternity unscathed. But the planet remembers otherwise. Beneath our feet, time moves like a slow tide, pulling under each monument, each language, each certainty. To study the ancients is to see ourselves refracted through the mirror of impermanence. What we call progress may simply be the pause between erasures. The ancient world warned us. In every recovered tablet and broken stele, there is a whisper that knowledge decays faster than stone. The Sumerians wrote lists, the Egyptians built in granite, the astronomers of the Andes carved their mathematics into mountain faces, and yet only fragments endure. The same sun that fed them bleaches their memory from existence. Civilization, no matter how precise, is merely an arrangement of dust pretending to be permanent. The silence between epochs is not absence, but inevitability. Imagine for a moment the planet as an archivist of indifference. It stores everything indiscriminately. The golden ziggurat and the plastic bottle, the law code and the advertisement. Future archaeologists will not judge our intelligence by the stars we map, but by the debris we leave. The layers will speak plainly. The Anthropocene, a thin shimmer of toxicity compressed into the geological record. We are carving our own stratum of vanity, one that will whisper one truth. The builders thought themselves immune to cycles. The ancients did not. They built as those already mourning. Each monument was both achievement and epitaph. Their cities were tombs prepared for their own disappearance. When the Sumerians spoke of kingship descending from heaven, they were recalling that civilization itself had once been lost and renewed, a descent, not a creation. Their mathematics was not ambition, but remembrance, the preservation of surviving order amid constant collapse. To calculate was to grieve. In Egypt, every dynasty obsessed over restoration. Temples were refurbished, monuments reinscribed, names recarved atop older names. Each pharaoh attempted to defeat oblivion by overwriting the past, yet in doing so, he eroded it further. Restoration becomes another layer of destruction. Continuity disguises loss. The same hands that preserve knowledge also distort it. Our own digital archives, fragile and bright, will one day face the same entropy disguised as progress, data corruption masquerading as preservation. The cycle of forgetting is more than historical pattern. It is the natural metabolism of knowledge. Cultures rise not by acquisition, but by amnesia, each generation rebuilding the cosmos from the fragments its predecessors left behind. We praise innovation, yet our breakthroughs are often rediscoveries, echoes of equations once carved into clay or encoded in myth. The wheel turns, each revolution erasing its trace. To know everything, it seems, is to wind the clock toward another forgetting. Imagine those lost eras not as primitive, but as sophisticated in ways now invisible. Their sciences absorbed, their symbols misunderstood. To them, we might appear equally archaic, our worship of machinery, our faith in unseen networks, our devotion to algorithms we cannot fully comprehend. Technology has replaced divinity, but the rhythm is unchanged. We build temples of glass and light, believing they will illuminate forever. Yet the blackouts will come. The archives will fade. The hum of servers will quiet into the same stillness that swallowed papyrus libraries and clay tablets. Under that silence lies a deeper question. Why must knowledge be cyclic? Why cannot memory remain whole? Perhaps consciousness itself demands forgetting as the price of renewal. Just as forests burn to seed their successors, civilizations dissolve so that others can bloom from their ashes. Each collapse preserves the essential by erasing the excessive. What endures are not details but principles, the geometry of harmony, the reverence for pattern, the warning that hubris precedes silence. The rest is noise, shed in the turning of the ages. In that sense, we are not descendants, but reincarnations. Our myths, our architecture, our boundless curiosity are expressions repeated endlessly in different voices. The builders of Giza watched the same stars we study today, perceiving them so through the same brief window of clarity before time drifts again. Their equations, our algorithms, their stone alignments, our satellites, each strives for permanence in a universe that tolerates none. We are remembering ourselves under new names. Consider the flood memories that lingered across the last chapter of our history. They were not only warnings, but operating manuals. They encoded the awareness that every rise carries the ghost of submergence. When the water recedes, rebuilding begins, not from innovation, but from recollection. The survivors know that the archive must be redrawn before amnesia takes hold. They rebuild in stone precisely because they expect silence. Each era is a brief exhale before the lungs of time fill again with ash, with sand, with salt water. To grasp this is to see civilization as conversation between presence and absence. The builders send messages forward through matter, trusting that the recipients, us, will know to interpret ruin as text. When we study their alignments, their acoustics, their geometries, we are reading their language of resilience. They are not gone. They are waiting to be re-understood. The cycle of forgetting is also a cycle of remembrance, a coiled spiral rather than a closed circle, expanding through rediscovery. But our remembrance is fragile. We drown in information yet starve for meaning. The noise of acceleration is louder than any silence endured by the ancients. While they feared oblivion, we fear stillness. We fill the void with data, hoping that enough accumulation will protect us. Yet digital immortality is illusion. A single solar flare, a magnetic reversal, or simply time's indifference could unravel it in seconds. All the world's knowledge compressed into circuits could vanish faster than a papyrus pressed by rain. Archaeologists of the future may find no parchment, no silicon, only a fossilized pulse of radiation from our vanished machines. What will they conclude? That we mastered everything except memory. That our monuments were invisible, our temples intangible, our gods indecipherable because we spoke in ephemeral code. To them, our age may appear as dark as the one we label prehistoric. The continuum persists. Light, collapse, shadow, rebirth. The medium changes, but the forgetting remains constant. Perhaps that realization is gift, not tragedy. Forgetting cleans the page, allowing creation again. Each culture's dissolution releases its insight into the planetary bloodstream, waiting to crystallize elsewhere under new skies. The lost technologies of Sumer may live in our physics. The resonant architecture of Egypt may whisper through our acoustics. The astronomical cycles of the Maya may beat within our algorithms. Memory diffuses even when record perishes, surviving as intuition in the species. The archive resides not in monuments, but in minds. Stand outside under the night sky, and you stand beside every astronomer who ever lived. The constellations are the oldest database, unchanged yet endlessly reinterpreted. Their arrangement is an act of continuity between the living and the erased. When you tilt your head upward, you participate in the oldest ritual of recognition. The same procession that guided the ancients now guides us, a pendulum of awareness swinging between ignorance and remembrance. To look into the heavens is to acknowledge the debt of every forgotten era that aligned stone with star. Still, cycles demand responsibility. If forgetting is inevitable, then remembering becomes sacred. We must design not merely for survival, but for intelligibility beyond our disappearance. To encode meaning in forms that endure translation, geometry, rhythm, proportion. The ancients did not rely solely on words. They inscribed truths in universal constants. We could do the same. Our mathematics, our music, our light, all are dialects that time understands. They are our insurance against oblivion, the tones that might awaken the next civilization after our sleeps. The end, then, is not apocalypse, but continuation. The collapse we fear is simply a pause between symphonies. We are custodians of echoes, caretakers of inherited silence. When the next silence descends, as it must, what matters is not what we preserve, but how clearly we remind the future that we tried to remember. The language of stone, of sound, of sky will continue translating our intent long after we are dust. Civilization may vanish, but memory, true memory, evades extinction by transforming. So listen now to the quiet pulse beneath everything. It is the rhythm of civilizations breathing in unison across time. They rise, they shine, they fade, they seed. Each leaves messages hidden in geometry, in myth, in vibration. We uncover them layer by layer, calling it archaeology, but it is really therapy, our own recovery from collective amnesia. The ancients are not dead. They are the parts of us that still remember eternity. Someday someone else will excavate our remains and wonder who we were, what we believed, and why we vanished. They will define us through fragments, through algorithms half recovered, through magnetic ghosts in the soil. And perhaps they will realize, as we are beginning to, that oblivion is not punishment, but rhythm. Knowledge lives through disappearance. The cycle of forgetting is not curse, it is continuity, reminding every civilization that the past, though buried, breathes perpetually beneath the surface, waiting to be remembered again.
If you enjoyed the video, hit the like button, subscribe, and activate notifications so you don't miss our next videos.